Welcome to the Mission Room. The Mission Room podcast is your place for information, impact, and innovation for local and global missions. You will come away from these episodes feeling inspired and challenged to engage in God's global church. Our goal is to bring awareness to God's people about making disciples in a cross-cultural context. This show will incorporate classical foundations of missions into modern outlets, lift up best practices, and inspire you to see how you can win the world for Christ.
And the reality is, I think once God gets a hold of your heart, and once you clearly understand whether it's jumping into full-time ministry and missions locally or internationally, or whether you do ministry and missions through your job, whatever that may be, even behind a corporate desk, the Great Commission applies to all of us.
Okay. We're here with Brian Berman today of Project Mañana International. Welcome, Brian, to the Mission Room.
Hey, Emily, Ricky, it's great to be here. Thank you.
Brian is an exhibitor with ICOM for many, many years. He has been a workshop presenter, a lunch with missionaries speaker. So we're very familiar with Brian and Project Mañana. Brian, do you just want to give us a little bit of a rundown of what Project Mañana is, what you do, just kind of a brief overview before we kind of dive into the rest of the topics for today?
Yeah, absolutely. And again, it's a pleasure to be here. I like to tell people I'm the least likely candidate to be able to serve in mission work, and I've kind of got the front row seat. I'm originally from Southern California, was in the corporate America world in executive organizational leadership and marketing, public relations. And then 20 years ago, I relocated my life here to the Dominican Republic. And about 16 years ago, we started Project Mañana International. And really, Project Mañana was a birthing out of what I saw a need and an opportunity. The Dominican people with incredible intelligence and passion and great ideas and a wonderful culture. And of course, my American friends and background. And I figured perhaps I could be the bridge for people in these two worlds to connect and be a voice for those that didn't have a voice. And so it started out very humbly with my wife, Nebraska, and I. She's our executive director. And Project Mañana quickly grew. We were very strategic, but I love to tell people it's incredible to see what God has done over the last almost 2 decades. And so we have a holistic ministry that focuses on building strong families. We do it through 6 strategic projects, which is a nutrition project providing over 434 children a healthy, nutritious meal every day, including their families. And the most amazing thing happens is when you fill a child's belly, their mind opens up. And we know the only way to break the cycle of poverty is to have education. So we have an education project which manifests itself in various ways with tutoring centers, after school homework help, but we've also built a bilingual private Christian school in the least likely place that you would build a school here in a very rural, impoverished community in the Dominican Republic. We have preschool all the way up through high school. Some of our kiddos now are even getting older, and we have 30 people. Actually, 2 of them just graduated, so 28 still active. These were kids that grew up through our program. They get a full ride scholarship through sponsorship and partnership with Project Mañana to 3 local universities here, and they can get a bachelor's degree, and we help them with that.
Oh,
We also have a
wow.
clean,
That's incredible. Wow.
yeah, really, really cool thing. We also have a clean water project, which we realized the fact that nobody here in the Dominican Republic and many places around the world can't drink water out of the tap. Our water's not safe to drink, and a lot of people don't have access to being able to buy water bottles or filtered water. So we've partnered with an incredible organization called Filter of Hope. They're also exhibitors at ICOM, and we
Yeah.
use those water filters to bring clean water to people and also share the gospel message. We have a Princess Project, which is really focused on young teen girls. Unfortunately, the Dominican Republic has the 4th highest teen pregnancy rate in the world. And I'm not talking 18, 19, I'm 16, I'm talking 13, 14, 15, very young girls for various reasons getting pregnant. So our Princess Project is using their quinceañera, which is a special 15th birthday in a young girl's life. And we have over 2,000 beautiful dresses and a princess palace. And we use that birthday and a program that leads up to talk about purity, self esteem, God's design, just everything that these young girls should hear and then we celebrate their birthday. We never replace their families. We always partner with their family and we celebrate their quinceañera. Our fifth project is our prison project. Project Mañana is the only evangelical ministry here in the Dominican Republic that's allowed to operate in all of our 43 prisons. We are currently in 23 of them. So we have an entire staff, three women's prisons, 20 men's prisons, and we have a whole institute that works with the education and psychology department through the prison systems to what we do is called moral rehabilitation, which is the politically correct way to say we're going to share Jesus with people. We have a great program on how to become an authentic man and an authentic woman and really helping these inmates once they are released, because here in the Dominican, everybody will be released at some point, that they have a new take on life, which is with Christian biblical values and foundations. All of that is wrapped together with our most important project, which is our Timothy project. And that is, of course, the why, the what, the how. It's our spiritual development, peace, sharing the gospel with everybody, and then discipleship, and a little bit more discipleship. And that helps build strong families, mind, body, and soul. That's what Project Manana is.
I feel like
Wow.
I need to have another follow-up episode that dives into each of those projects because I know that's not the topic today, but I have questions.
That's incredible. I'm just trying to keep track of everything. That's in wow.
Yeah, really
Well,
amazing.
I was curious too, just to clarify. So you went to the Dominican before Project Mañana existed, and so you were there living in the Dominican prior to even establishing the mission of Project Mañana, correct?
That's yeah, that's correct.
Okay.
Actually, I mission work and ministry and being a full-time pastor was the last thing on my list to do. I have an incredible kind of got my attention story, that moment in your life that changes you, and that was in 2003. Fast forward as I started prioritizing things in my life, dear friend of mine, Pastor Dan McSwain, who was from Ohio but was serving at a church in California, invited me to take a bunch of high school students and some adults on a mission trip in 2007, April 2007, spring break. And he said, "We're going to the Dominican Republic." My response literally was, "Where's the Dominican Republic?" I thought maybe it was in Europe or who knows. Soon as he told me it was the Caribbean, of course I said I'm in.
Sold.
What I
That's awesome.
didn't know is God would grab me from that moment. And literally 4 days into my 7 day trip, I pulled Dan aside as our team leader. I told him what every pastor wants to hear, but he was very wise and very cautious. I said, "Dan, I'm not going home. I think I'm going to switch from corporate career to full-time missionary. This is what God's been preparing me for. This is what I want to do." Of course, he, cautioned me and said, "Let's pray about that. Let's talk about it." But you could see his excitement. I
Yeah.
called my boss from the Dominican Republic and told him, "Hey, we've got to sit down when I get home." Fast forward, I returned April 2007, resigned by August 2007, sold everything, gave away more than I sold, and two suitcases of clothes and a laptop computer. I moved to the Dominican Republic December 31st, 2007, and joined another organization. I served as their vice president for 3 years, and that was Missionary Boot Camp. I learned well, I still learn today, but I
Yeah.
started learning everything. And then met my wife a few years later. We got married. And on September 30th, 2010, is when we opened the doors to Project Manana.
Isn't that an incredible
Holy
story?
cow.
That's mind-boggling, but
Wow.
that's so I think it's a testament to the power of let opening your mind and going on a cross-cultural trip and seeing where the Lord takes you. So, Brian, you've taught at ICOM for several years now a global mission strategy workshop. And we would love to just hear about that as far as, in the last few episodes, we've been talking about global missions versus local missions and how the church plays an important part in, spreading the word and getting your people involved and making sure that your church has a strategy and an alignment with what your mission statement is and all of that. We would love to just hear some of the workshop strategy that you do and really kind of walk us through what that strategy creation looks like. And then we might jump in and just ask questions and have a little discussion at various points.
Yeah, absolutely. Coming out of corporate America, we had all kinds of consultants and trainers and workshops and best practices and conferences. And that was what I was used to. And that was what helps us grow in our career and experience and knowledge. And coming into missions, I think the ICOM is literally the epicenter of being able to learn and grow. But outside of that, as I was new to this ministry and mission world, and I started soliciting church partners, growing personal support in order to be able to be living on the mission field internationally, I started noticing some patterns. And I did, kind of what I do and was writing things down and putting different ideas together. There was no consultants. There was no manual. There was no best practices. And I say that in a little bit in quotations because you can get that. And we're starting to see more of that at
Mhm.
ICOM. But outside of that, it was the wild west of trying to partner with churches and raise funds and raise
Yeah.
awareness and everything else. And, it was interesting. One of the things that I found out, you may know the statistic, the average missionary will have between 50 and 100 financial partners to be on the mission field. And, that's wonderful to some extent. It's also an incredible burden for somebody to manage 50 to 100 people or families or relationships. Everyone's asking the same question about, so how's it going? What are you doing? What's new? And
Yeah.
even putting on a newsletter or whatever, you quickly realize that you spend about 80% is some of the statistics that I've seen and heard of your missionary time is spent on administration. And that's not why we get into doing what we want to do.
Yeah.
So I started figuring out what if we can share some ideas and strategies. The other thing I realized is as I was knocking on church doors as a missionary, every single church had a different way they did missions, a different way
Mhm.
they funded their missions budget, a different way they selected who gets to be a missionary, where they work, why they work, how they work.
Yeah.
And that's wonderful. That diversity is what, I believe is the great body of Christ. But I also realized that many churches were kind of doing the shotgun approach or maybe didn't even know what they were doing to
Mhm.
some level, and we're just trying to figure it out as building the plane as the plane was flying. And so we started this workshop and we started just sharing. First was personal experiences. When I'm not wearing the president's hat at Project Mañana, I've now consulted with a couple dozen churches with, dozens of missionaries on the field at no charge, simply just want to help and share. My method or the workshop that we teach is not the correct or the only way to do it.
Mhm.
We just share what's worked and what hasn't worked and some best practices. And so
Yeah.
this workshop is designed for two types of people. The first type is a mission pastor, an executive pastor, even a senior pastor, or a mission committee that is looking to say, how can we best engage our congregation, steward our resources, and grow here locally, nationally in the United States, and then eventually globally?
Mhm.
The second group of people are the missionaries, the ministries, both locally and internationally, that say, we want to partner with the church, not just for financial benefit, but a true partnership in the true sense of the word that says, we're going to do life together and we're going to be an extension of what's being preached in the pulpit in Indiana or Arkansas or California, all the way to Indonesia, Africa, Dominican Republic, and beyond. And so this workshop really gives a high level of concepts from how to fund your budget, how to select missionaries through an objective rubric process, how to keep on mission and focused to avoid missional drift. How do we set up a memorandum of understanding, this business term that simply means as a missionary, I'm going to deliver all of these promises to you and we're going to write it down, and as a church, they're going to deliver all these promises. And that way we have a document to make sure we're all on point.
I love that. I love that. I think that's
Yeah.
very, very good, especially a lot oftentimes we think of it as just keeping accountability towards the missionary and all the pressures upon them to quote unquote produce. But
Mhm.
in reality, for the healthy relationship to be there, it needs to have a support and encouragement and some skin in the game from the church as well.
My dear friend Todd Guckenberger, who runs Back to Back Ministries, says expectations are just premeditated resentments. And so, as long as we can write it down and everybody knows where we're at, you have a document to go back to say, hey, I promised as a missionary that I was going to communicate to you monthly via newsletter. I promised as a missionary that we were going to invest X percentage in this program, or that we would hire X number of nationals or missionaries, or that I would take a furlough every 10 years or 7 year, whatever that is, whatever you in the church deem as important. And then the church, I think this really gets into the area of finances, which is, of course, a big piece of this missionary church relationship. And a lot of times we throw the word partnership in, and a lot of times that comes from missionaries. Hey, I would love to partner with you, church.
Yeah.
Really, what they're saying is, I need some money. And so,
Right.
yes, yes, we do. Money is very important to help meet the budget and do things, but a true partnership is a mutually beneficial relationship. And so when we both get that and you have a long-term sustained relationship, so I'm talking years, there will be cycles. There will be times when, now speaking to our church friends, your missionaries are going to be the golden boy, golden girl. They're going to be doing, they can't do any wrong. And there'll come a day when they're going to maybe make a mistake or screw up or a bad decision that they tried to avoid, but they fell into anyways. And that's when that partnership relationship says, we're going to walk through this together. And through those peaks and the valleys, that's where we see success on the other end, and vice versa from the missionary's perspective as well.
That's awesome, Brian. I think the thing a lot of churches we have, heard about or that we see as our staffs in and out of our own churches and visiting churches is the strategy, the written strategy and the expectations. I love what you said about the expectations or premeditated resentments. I think that applies to so much, working in a church and on a team and just the clarity and communication is so important. And I would love to hear a little bit about what is your strategy when you're coaching churches or when you're talking to someone at ICOM that wants more information. What are some of the first steps that you tell them, like, here's what you need to do first, second, third, that kind of thing?
The first thing is very important for our church leaders or the mission committee to understand is we are stewards of God's resources and we are stewards of their particular church. And so when we are selecting staff members, people who are working our children's ministry, and ministry partners and missionaries, these should be the best possible candidates to carry out the mission and vision of the church. Oftentimes we have, little Johnny who grew up in the church and is so and so's niece or nephew, and we're going to hire them because he's just or she's so great or he's so great. Oftentimes it's, oh, I have a friend that I know that does this and they're just such
Yeah.
fun people. And while that's great, we want to do ministry and life with people that we get along with and enjoy. As leaders, as stewards, we really need an objective rubric that allows us to choose the best possible candidate for the mission that we want to carry out. So,
Mhm.
one of the first things I tell the church is you've got to check your emotional connections at the door when you are selecting your missionary and ministry partners. I
Mhm.
encourage them, and we have some templates that we provide, samples, where to develop an objective rubric. The perfect missionary would have these qualities, would work in this area of the world, would have this vision statement, would have these core values. And you write all of that down and you create a score on it, 1 to 5. 5 being the best, they've got it all, 1 being they don't have it at all or 0. And then all of your wonderful candidates that you have, whether it's little Johnny that grew up through the church, whether it's somebody that's knocking on your door to say, "Hey, we heard about you and we'd love to talk to you about partnership." Whoever that is, you run them through that objective rubric. It does two things. One, it ensures fairness and objectivity to the selection process. But two, it gives the church, again, a fair and easy way to say, yes, you qualify and meet what it is that we want to achieve, or love you sounds like an incredible missionary, but you don't fit within what it is we're trying to do. And this is what's called focusing on mission to ensure we don't have missional drift.
I think that also puts a very healthy exercise for the congregation to lean into God's direction and vision for them as a congregation and helps with buy-in. So it aligns with the leadership's vision for and direction for the church, but then also that then permeates throughout all facets of ministry and missional partnerships. And I think that helps with people having the buy-in and the understanding of why the mission, who they pick and why they're supporting those different organizations and mission groups. And so I think that's a great way for the holistic approach for a congregation to go all in for the Great Commission. And that's some things that we have heard a little bit, not in that type of a detail, but that's the common thread that we love to hear sprinkled throughout our various episodes, coming back to that reality that a healthy church is going to have a strategy, a vision, and is going to have a wholeness of the Great Commission, both locally and globally.
I love what you said, Ricky, about the strategy, the mission, the vision. This is the second step or the second component in what we talk about in this workshop, or what I would suggest any church should focus on. And that second step is really looking at missional drift. And I use the example. I'm originally from Southern California. We've got a great hamburger chain called In and Out, best hamburgers you can get in the whole world, and french fries, and their menu is very limited. They've got hamburgers, french fries, and shakes and sodas, and that's pretty much it. And then you've got Pizza Hut, and they make great pizza, and their menu's limited, and they can put some toppings on the pizza. But you wouldn't walk into In and Out Burger and ask for a pepperoni pizza. And you wouldn't walk into Pizza Hut and ask for a delicious bag of fries. And that's there's a reason that they're hyper focused and they stick to the mission. And I share this with churches is oftentimes, and this goes both ways to the missionary as well, as missionaries are looking for partnership and funding, they connect with a church and the church says, "Oh, you should start a sports ministry." So the missionary says, "Oh, this could be, some funding and partnership. Yes, let's do that." And then they go to the next church and they say, "Oh, you should start a discipleship ministry." And they say, "Yes, we should do that." And you go to the next church and they say, "You should start a women's ministry." And before you know it, you have a core mission that was to really do one thing, and you have so many different missional drifts. And I'm not talking diversity. Project Mañana is a great example of a diverse buffet of practical projects, although we stick to our 6 core projects. But what I'm talking about is getting on missional drift. And when you start on missional drift, even a 2-degree difference isn't a big deal at the beginning. But over time, that 2-degree drift is going to widen and widen and widen and widen to the point where you are so far off. And we see this often with ministries that then need to start collapsing on themselves to get rid of programming, get rid of unnecessary budget, get rid of areas that are not productive because they've allowed themselves to get on missional drift. So I encourage both missionaries and mission organizations, as well as churches, to say, wow, that may sound like a great idea, but that's outside of our scope of what we're doing. And if you want to expand the scope, there should be a dialogue, a committee, a process, more than one person decision of, all right, now let's open up and we'll move into this new area.
That's incredible. Yeah. I think everything that you just shared is so helpful. And I know that there's a lot of different churches that are out there, be that leaders, let alone mission teams or departments of churches that could really benefit from this and just kind of wonder like, how do we do this? And that's the thing that we sometimes forget is excuse me, within the church, especially within the independent Christian church, is that people are reflecting and repeating what they learned and what they were taught. So if they saw a certain pattern in practice, then they just continue with it because you don't know what you don't know. And if you can't implement something that you haven't been taught and you haven't been trained. And so I think that's why it's really important for churches to also look at something like that's why it's so important for us to to come together at something like an ICOM where we have workshops available for resources and training and relationships like yourself and how you've been able to help out churches and different organizations to show them there is a different way. There is a healthy way that we can be doing this. And just because you are putting parameters and having this non-objective approach to things doesn't take the heart out of it. It's not removing the heartstrings and the desire for impact and lessening any of that. It's just getting that as our as Rob, our CEO, likes to say, laser focus into a particular direction that the Holy Spirit's guiding leadership. And so I think those that are listening, if you're a part of leadership or a part of a mission team, really look at yourselves and how you're approaching things and consider, coming and looking for resources like what Brian has shared at ICOM before. And yeah, I just think that's really, really good what you've shared, Brian. Thank you.
It reminds me a little bit about some of the conversations we've had on the ICOM staff, our team meetings about like what is our main objective, in the execution of ICOM, the conference, and ICOM, the organization. And, I think for a long time, it's been very much kind of like bringing all and, bringing everyone along. And you can do that. But I think if you have a laser focus, it's harder to really have this broad sweeping thing, of pulling everyone together versus like, this is actually what we're hoping to accomplish. And does it fit into this parameter to carry out our mission? And I think it's just good to hear kind of affirmation of like, it's not emotional. It's not supposed to be like, we don't like what you're doing. It's more like, we feel God is telling us to do this. Does, XYZ program or speaker or whoever fit into this role to accomplish our mission. And I feel like that even organizations, can see that when they're starting programs and stuff too, to make it's like you said with Project Mañana, like you've got your core six and, does everything, does anything else fit into that?
I agree, Emily, and I think both you and Ricky really eloquently set us up for then going into what we would share in the workshop of the third and fourth step, which is execution and evaluation. So, really understanding
Mhm.
with this partnership, we're talking about the true meaning of partnership, a two-way street. We have a conference at ICOM where we are hyper focused on engaging people to be senders and goers, and the short-term missions as well as medium or long-term missionaries are very important. But I encourage churches to let them know that the short-term mission trip, that is a component of the execution strategy of a healthy global mission strategy that works. So the Super Bowl is not getting a mission team to go from Montana to Africa. That is very important so that they can experience it firsthand. They could see that the ministry is doing what they say they're doing. The missionaries feel encouraged and undergirded. There's obviously hands and feet, there's obviously financial pieces, but
Mhm.
the mission short term trip is simply one component of an entire healthy strategy that says we really want to understand whether we go or not. I mean, and I share the prime example. 5 years ago, or now maybe it's more, sorry, 10 years ago or more, nobody knew the word pandemic. Nobody knew what that looked like. But as I started in my career now 20 years ago, and I started realizing that short-term missions seem to be a lot of what people are talking about, and it's understandable because that's the firsthand experience that people have. I realized, what happens if the short-term teams stop coming? The statistic through ECFA and other organizations is upwards of 80% in some cases. Ministries rely on the short term mission trip fees as part of their main funding model.
Oh,
In other
wow.
words, if the short term teams don't come down, the ministry in itself, literally, you've cut off the lifeblood revenue stream. And my thought was always, Now you not only don't have people coming, you have ministry collapse, you have people,
Yeah.
ministry workers, nationals losing their jobs. So we have to understand there's got to be a sustainability component. There's got to be a component that says, hey, mission trips are crucial. We do them at Project Manana. Matter of fact, we love our short term, medium, and long term teams, but it's just one component of when we create what we call, and I'm happy to share this with anybody that's listening. We can get them a folder in the cloud of some resources of the objective rubric we've talked about, other budgeting templates, different documents that we use, including the the idea for the short-term partnership and what that looks like on, how that should lay out, and the mission strategy, revenue
Mhm.
strategy with the short-term teams. And so that's just, one component. And then the fourth component is simply the evaluation. To have a healthy and successful global and local mission strategy, we have to understand what are the milestones, the key performance indicators that we want to manage. The quick ones,
Mhm.
whenever you start to talk in the circles, you say, well, what's your annual budget? And quickly, churches or ministries are using that to size up. Well, are they big, which must mean they're doing something
Yeah.
right? Or are they small, which must mean that they're not very interesting to partner with? Both of those are not 100% correct in either scenario. So,
Mhm.
what are the key performance indicators? Is it number of baptisms? Is it number of staff? Is it number of times you share the gospel? Is it number of impressions that you have on people? Is it a bunch of different factors that you can have, but you need to set up clear goals and milestones with your churches, with your ministry partners to say, this is how we're going to evaluate if this partnership is successful or not.
Yeah.
And then that partnership strategy, which we call a holistic partnership agreement, we actually create a proposal and we write all of this stuff in there. So when we're knocking on a church's door, we want to tell them, hey, so here's all the things that we would love from you and all the things we would love to offer you. We're going to write it down and we're going to give you this proposal. It comes out for us between 12 and 14 pages, and it gives some background information, it gives some doctrinal information,
Mhm.
it gives some finance information. But what it gives is that memorandum of understanding. Project Manana, or me as a missionary or ministry, will do this, and church, you'll do this. And together we're going to work as a team, the body of Christ, and deliver a result. And we now have key performance indicators that we're going to measure to see, did we achieve that goal, and celebrate it when we did, correct when we didn't, and modify to go forward.
Mhm. Where do you think the biggest pushback is in this process that you get either when you're talking from the Project Manana side or you're coaching? Where do you find the biggest pushback or hesitancy is?
I think a couple things. I think missionaries are so hungry, thirsty to partner with churches that they want to really show their best foot forward, be that best missionary, be a pro. And so they're scared to really open up and be transparent in saying, I am human. The mission field is probably the most, especially international missionaries, the most challenging environment physically, mentally, spiritually. It will tax your marriage, it will tax your family, it will tax your faith, and it's all wonderful. This is no surprise to God, but because of that, the missionary may not open up. That flower may not fully blossom and bloom to show its true beauty, because when the church asks, "How's everything going?" the missionary quickly says, "Oh, it's great. It's wonderful.
Yeah.
We're good." And there may be a time when it's not great, wonderful, or good. That's number one. Number two is on the church side, I think sometimes, and at no fault or no intention, they put unrealistic expectations on the ministry or missionary. A quick example, which ties into a few different key points, is let's say you're sending $100 to a missionary per month, which is many churches, that's kind of the median.
Mhm.
But you also want that missionary to provide you monthly newsletters, come and speak once a year and give updates and preach at your church and do all this wonderful things. Well, if you add up that generous gift of $100, which I know people are sacrificing to give, that $1,200 budget doesn't give you enough money for plane tickets, for food, for ministry, for everything. And so the
Right.
missionary is feeling this pressure. Now they've got to go replicate this to more and more and more churches, thinking if I get more churches, the budget will go up. The
Mhm.
problem is it's an unsustainable model because the more
Mhm.
churches you have, they're all asking for the same thing.
Yeah.
So
Right.
this is when you start to see the churches and ministries colliding and starting to collapse. One, because many times it's not written down. So we thought or we expected the missionary to do something, or we thought or expected the church to do something. And now we have a premeditated resentment, or not even premeditated, it's a full on resentment at
Yeah.
that point. Uh, and so that's, I see an area where it collapses, number one. Number two, for churches, I see a big area of opportunity, which is, and this may ruffle some of our feathers, but I hope it creates a good dialogue because that's what we need to be doing as ministry workers is churches that have a beautiful world map in their lobby and they've got push pins all over these exotic, wonderful places around the world. And they say, this is all the missionaries that we support and it's wonderful. There's nothing, hear me clearly if you're listening to this podcast, there's nothing wrong with that. That is incredible. Thank
Mhm.
you for, investing in so many places. My only question would be, are you going deep with these missionaries or are you sprinkling just a little bit of dust on the top or a few drops of water versus a fresh drink from a fire hydrant? And so my big soapbox that I love to share with churches is there's plenty of churches to go around, there's plenty of ministries to go around. My suggestion would be to have fewer missional partners, ministry partners, go deep and long term with them versus having 50 or 100 or 200 and you just are giving a little bit to each.
Mhm.
And churches can't even manage that many relationships with that many ministries. So this is a place where I've literally walked through over a dozen churches who have come to me saying, we have 20 partners. We've got 30 partners. One church had, I think it was 36 partners. How do we tell them that we want 6 partners or 4 partners? We love these
Yeah.
people. We've done ministry with them. So I have a whole workshop and some teaching materials and some ideas that's helpful when you have to focus in, as you were talking about, that hyper focus. There is a healthy way to offboard missionaries, making
Mhm.
sure that we're not financially impacting people or emotionally pulling the rug out from under them. There's a healthy way to offboard them, just like there's a healthy way to onboard new missionaries.
Mhm.
Yeah, as listening to what you were saying there, there's a few things that really stuck out to me, especially as you were highlighting towards the end there, how many missionaries or mission organizations some churches have on their plate. I remember hearing from a missionary who was sharing with me that I don't want to call it frustration, but that challenge to where churches were giving, and like you said, you articulated it well. If that is all that they're able to do, that's fine, that money is impacting the kingdom and it has in a place, but a lot of individuals are able to hit that $50 a month or $100 a month. So where churches have the ability to bring the funds together to be able to output a higher amount that an individual may not be able to. And so if you're giving out more individual sizes compared to what a collaborative amount could be, that's where the church can really step up and make a bigger impact. And I think sometimes we maybe unintentionally or intentionally we get excited as a church to say, hey, we are a mission minded church who has 30 something missionaries. Is that drawing more attention to you as a church, or is that drawing more attention to the work that Christ is doing around the globe? And that's the question. I think sometimes we have to be, are we more proud about how many we have, or are we more grounded in allowing God to work through our group to have the most potent potential for the kingdom that we can? And I think as you were sharing the parameters going into that and helping to really get that hyper focus, both monetarily and in addition to the vision and strategy of the church, is really allowing the most impact to be achieved. And I love all these different coaching aspects that you've been able to put together and the wisdom you've gained over the years. So I want to shift over in that. aspect. Some of these things that you've been sharing with us, you've had over 20 years now of mission work, specifically there in the Dominican Republic. And you have said at the beginning a few different times, you are the least qualified. But I think a lot of people listening to this probably would beg to differ a little bit, as
Yeah.
you have shared some wonderful insights and wisdom. Is that something that has just come together over the years that you've seen grown? Was it something that kinda was just laid in your lap at the beginning of all this and you've implemented it? Can you share a little bit of that journey of how you've grown in your wisdom and knowledge of a healthy mission organization and ministry?
Absolutely. One of the things that I've realized now, almost 5 decades of life, is we need to be honest with ourselves first and foremost. We need to understand we all have strengths and we all have weaknesses. We all have gifts and we all have talents. God has packed those in. The most amazing thing I love is God does not call the qualified, He qualifies the called. And I have a book, and the title says it all, is God uses ordinary people to do extraordinary things. So I think we have to call a spade and say what it is. For all of our missionary friends, what I would say in general is the profile of person that has a big heart, that has a calling to ministry, that has an eye for adventure, that has a risk tolerance that's higher maybe than somebody else that would say I could never do that. Those typical people make incredible missionaries and mission leaders, but typically, they don't have administrative, business experience, profit and loss, financial backing, all of the things that somebody that may be more on the sender side would have. And so it's interesting for me in my just personal journey, starting in corporate America, starting in a role where it was all about redundancy and cross training and career path and all of these things. And then learning budgeting and profit and loss and revenue streams and key performance indicators and all these terms that we use. I realized, wow, God doesn't waste our past and any of our experiences, and we can use those for the future. So, my encouragement to people that are listening to this podcast that have the opportunity to walk the halls in the ICOM conference every single year is to really be honest and say, I am good at this and I'm not so good at that. And the cool thing is that piece that you're not so good at, you will find somebody at the ICOM conference that is going to help and walk alongside with you, teach you, show you, grow you, mentor you. And the piece that you're really good at, well, you better be that person to help teach and grow and show somebody who's not so good at that. I'm so grateful to the opportunity that I have had, and a lot of what I shared today from a place of confidence, a place of successful ministry comes through a rocky, real road of me coming down. I was very successful in corporate America. Everything I touched turned to gold. I was at a young age, made a great salary, had a great title, had whatever the American dream would tell you to have, the world would tell you to have. And I came down with a big Superman symbol on my chest to the Dominican Republic, thinking I'm going to save the day and I'm going to just implement, and all these poor Dominicans are just going to be, everything's going to be great. And I hit a wall and I realized I don't know anything about the Dominican culture. I can't even speak Spanish. I've never been a missionary. I've never been in full-time pastoralship. And so I had to really have a real reality check. And that's probably, Emily, like you said, another episode to talk about the famous missionary breakdown that I'm sure every missionary listening to your podcast right now has had. But it's that realistic moment to realize, wait a minute, I've got to back up, identify my strengths and my weaknesses, utilizing my past successes and my past failures, or what I more like to call learning opportunities to go forward in ministry. And if you look at our Bible heroes, the World Series or the Hall of Fame of those that we have in our Bible, all of them, all of them were ordinary people that God chose to do extraordinary things. all of them have made good decisions and some unfortunate decisions, and we see how that plays out for the whole glorification to God for Him only. And that's what we have to understand.
Yeah.
Amen.
Amen. I would say, just as we kind of wrap up, I would ask, what would be, if you could give advice to churches who are struggling to kind of come out of the like status quo, or like that's what we've always done, what would be your advice or encouraging statement to them to like almost take the leap into really establishing this strategy and implementing it into their church and having that mission vision?
I start the workshop every year at ICOM with the following. No matter if you are just starting your mission strategy for the first time or you've been doing it for 150 years in your church, and many people, many churches been doing it 150 years the same way, that should tell you something. Today is the day where we can all take a pause, pull out a blank sheet of paper and say, at the very least, we can question and ask the hard questions on, is our strategy meeting the mission and vision of the church? Does our strategy glorify God? Is our strategy designed in a way that it's sustainable and really helps further the kingdom? And simply asking those questions. If you answer yes to all of that, don't change a thing. Keep going and doing the way you are. I think there's always room for improvement. So don't think you've ever arrived. But if there is a no in any of those questions, my simply humble piece of advice or even encouragement would be, don't worry. You are the same as every other church and everybody else trying to figure this out across the world. But the wisdom would say it's time to look out how to improve, change. And that may mean the thing that you've done for 150 years has come to an end and we start a new chapter in the book.
Mm,
That's so good. Well, Brian,
that,
thank
yeah.
you so much for joining us, and really just appreciate you pouring out your heart, your life experience on the field, and just sharing a glimpse into the journey that God has used you and molded you and brought you through the rocky roads and allowed you to experience both the mountaintops and the valley lows, but how all of that really has brought together, along with the people surrounding you, Project Mañana and the impact that you're having in the Dominican Republic. So thank you so much for all that you've done and continue to do, and your reliance upon God to develop you continuously every day.
You bet. Ricky, Emily, it's been an absolute pleasure. The ICOM is a favorite place every single year in the fall that we look forward to. And all the throughout the year, the information and staying connected through ICOM as an organization is invaluable, is wonderful. And thank you for the opportunity. I am available to you guys and the ICOM and anybody that's hearing the podcast as I can serve you. All boats rise with the tide, and we all work for the same guy. So at no cost, I'm more than happy to share any of the successes and failures so that you can celebrate in those or avoid those. And it's been a privilege and a pleasure to come to you today from the Dominican Republic and chat with you guys. Thank you. And if somebody wants a quick resource today, my book is on Amazon and Kindle, Ordinary
Yeah.
People, Extraordinary Things. It's broken into 3 sections. It talks the first section about, my background in Project Mañana. The second section talks all to right to churches about what we've been talking about on this podcast. And the third section talks to missionaries. And there's everything we talked about today and more practical application pieces that are very helpful.
Brian, we'll be sure to put links down in our
Sure.
episodes with all that.
Our goal for this podcast is to spread awareness about the Great Commission and how everyone can use their skills to further the kingdom no matter where you are in your journey. Please do us a favor and hit that follow or subscribe button. That way you'll get notified of our new episodes as well as help others find our podcast. You can also connect with us on Facebook or Instagram and on our website at theicom.org. See you next time.